Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Wednesday, October 9th. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Coming up, new research is showing a drastic drop in enrollment for low-income undocumented students at California public universities.
What we found is going back to 2016 or so, new undocumented low-income students have declined by half.
Hear more details in just a few minutes, but first, today's headlines. A former leader of the Kern County Young Republicans is facing federal fraud charges. According to the Justice Department, 41-year-old Brian M. Williams pleaded guilty on Monday to bank fraud. Over a period of 6 years, court documents allege he wrote checks to himself from the political organization, totaling more than $230,000. Sentencing is scheduled for January. He faces up to 30 years in prison and a $1 million fine. Avian influenza, or bird flu, has now infected cattle at 82 dairy farms across California. As KVPR's Carrie Klein reports, efforts to contain the virus are having ripple effects in other industries.
Those efforts include more PPE for dairy workers, like face shields and disposable booties. Plus, farms are restricting the movement of people and vehicles on site. Tricia Stever-Blattler of the Tulare County Farm Bureau says those measures are affecting more than dairy farmers.
Anytime we talk about any economic disruption or hardship in the farm economy of a county like Tulare, there certainly is a trickle-down effect.
In particular, she says she recently spoke with a cattle hauler whose job is to transport the animals from place to place.
He's currently seeing 2/3 less income for his employees, the drivers, and yet he still has all that overhead and payroll that he's trying to meet.
Dairy farmers, too, could face financial woes. Even those cattle that fully recover from the virus may produce less milk. For KVPR News, I'm Carrie Klein.
Californians will vote on 10 statewide ballot propositions this fall, and we are bringing you what each one means this week and next on Central Valley Daily. Proposition 36 would enforce harsher penalties for certain crimes to address concerns about shoplifting and drug possession. Nigel Duara with our partner Cal Matters has this explainer.
If Prop 36 passes, people could be charged with a felony for stealing or getting caught with hard drugs if they already have 2 prior theft or drug convictions. The proposition would also give people the option to complete drug treatment instead of going to prison. Prop 36 would roll back a decade-old law that reduced penalties for certain theft and drug crimes. Prosecutors, police, and big box retailers now blame these reduced penalties for an increase in shoplifting and other theft, and say ramping penalties back up will discourage more people from stealing. They also say Prop 36 will help combat homelessness by offering unhoused people who get caught with drugs the option to pursue treatment instead of going to prison. Opponents say that no studies on criminal justice or homelessness support the idea that harsher punishments prevent crime or get people off the street.
That was Nigel Duara with Cal Matters. For $2.5 million, a Hanford institution could be yours. The owner of Superior Dairy is retiring and has put the ice cream shop selling enormous portions of small batch flavors up for sale. The real estate agent selling the store, Ryan Portugal, told news station KC24 that he hopes the shop can live on under new management.
The outcome that everybody wants, not just myself, the owners, but I think all of the Valley, is to find somebody that wants to come in, give it the love that it needs, and just take it to the next level.
According to Portugal, the shop has stayed in the same family for all of its 95 years in operation. On Monday night, the Clovis City Council voted to change how it elects city council members. In 2 years, the city will transition into district-based elections rather than electing candidates at large. The decision follows a legal threat earlier this year from a law firm alleging that the at-large system potentially violated voting rights laws.
Support for Central Valley Daily comes from Fresno Mazda, a member of the Prieto Automotive family, celebrating the grand opening of the newly renovated showroom on Thursday, October 24th. This all-ages event features live music, refreshments, and a gift for the first 100 guests. myfresnomazda.com.
And now to our main story. When the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA, was first implemented in 2012, it opened opportunities for young undocumented people in the United States. It meant they could more easily apply for work and college without fear of deportation. More than 10 years later, many of the original DACA applicants still count on the same benefits, but younger people are barred from applying because of a 2021 court injunction. New research from the UCLA Civil Rights Project is now showing a connection between the lack of new DACA recipients and lower enrollment of undocumented students at California public universities. Bill Kidder is an administrator at UC Riverside who co-authored the new research. He joined me for a conversation to break down what this all means.
What we found is, going back to 2016 or so, new undocumented low-income students at the University of California and at the California State University have declined by half since 2016. And the reasons for that, Liz, I think connect a lot to this slow constriction on DACA. Fewer and fewer students each year have DACA compared to 5 years ago, compared to 10 years ago. And so those students who don't have DACA, they can't get campus jobs, they can't get local community jobs, working at Target and other places around a campus. And so it's constricting their opportunities for pursuing their higher education dreams.
Were you surprised by your findings? Did you find the results concerning? What was kind of your response?
I think the results are very concerning because for a couple reasons. One, that California has invested a lot in the K through 12 education and dreams of these undocumented students, many of whom have been here since the time they were infants or kindergartners or, third graders. So there's a public investment aspect to that question that's troubling. With respect to whether the results were surprising, what was surprising to me a little bit was just how consistent the findings were between the UC campuses, let's say UC Merced, for example, and the CSU campuses like Fresno State or CSU Bakersfield. We found very consistent patterns in nearly all of these campuses, and these are campuses that have very different admission standards, different populations they serve. And so to see the UC and CSU systems have such high consistency, again, pointed to the idea that there's some external force, like the decline of DACA, that was really driving the numbers.
While in this research, you didn't speak directly with DACA or undocumented students, but I do know that you've spoken to and worked with them a lot during your time at UC Riverside. What are some of the struggles that you hear from them in terms of pursuing a college degree?
So I have worked with undocumented students on several campuses in the UC and the CSU system. What we're finding in this study is consistent with those conversations with lots of other undocumented students, which is that they are struggling financially. They're not eligible for federal financial aid because of the absence of appropriate federal legislation.
And that would be like a Pell Grant, for example.
Correct. They're not eligible for federal Pell Grants. They are eligible for certain forms of state aid, but not the full basket of the combination of federal and state aid. And there's a kind of a double whammy effect between the absence of Pell Grant eligibility and the inability to get student employment for campus jobs, for surrounding community jobs, because fewer and fewer of these students have DACA. And so that's really constricting the ability of these students to pursue their higher education dreams and to let their talents take them to along the path of higher education.
Gavin Newsom recently vetoed a bill, Assembly Bill 2587, which would have allowed undocumented students to work on college campuses. What was your response to that news?
I'm disappointed in the governor's veto of that bill. In the near future, we do need to prepare ourselves, working with campus administrators, working with folks in private philanthropy, to figure out a range, an ensemble of strategies to support undocumented students. So whether it's the Opportunity for All bill, or we also delve into some other alternative, innovative solutions that haven't been tried yet, It's obvious that more than one thing needs to happen in order to support very talented, very hardworking, undocumented students, especially because the legal status of DACA is presently at risk in the courts.
And it could go before the U.S. Supreme Court again next year, right? Can you give us kind of the lay of the land for what's next for DACA?
Sure. So there is a federal district court ruling in Texas that is on appeal to the federal appellate court. It's called the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. A decision by the Fifth Circuit is expected. And then once that is issued in the months ahead, most court watchers expect that case will return to the Supreme Court again, within the next year or so. The court has shifted. So the last DACA ruling in 2020 was when Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was part of the slender 5-4 majority on the court. And so that's something to take into consideration, is that the court has shifted to the right in the years since. And this is a different DACA question about the underlying legal merits, whereas the previous decision had to do with a procedural issue.
That was my conversation with Bill Kidder. He's a research associate with the UCLA Civil Rights Project and an administrator at UC Riverside. This Thursday, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals will hear oral arguments in a legal challenge to the DACA program. And that does it for today's show. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR with support from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. I'm Elizabeth Arkalian. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.